everyone. Welcome to another one of our interviews with folks. I've got Evan here with me today. Let's go ahead and just start with, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do, and all that good stuff.
I'm Evan Johnson. I'm a composer. I work pretty much exclusively with Valerie Work. She's sort of become my dedicated collaborator. And so the show that is part of the festival, The Scars of Your Body, is our first show together. And it's a full length piece. And I started writing musicals in high school. And I started composing when I was like 7 or 8, I think. Um, and yeah, before I did musical theater, I thought I was going to be a classical composer, and then I thought I was going to be a film composer, and then I discovered that I was going to be a theater composer um, by just accidents, just by doing pit orchestra in high school. And I just sort of instantly fell in love with theater, and that's kind of been my trajectory ever since. Um, I'm 25, and I have a degree from the California Institute of the Arts in composition. And I currently I just started a new job actually. I work at Broadway Licensing as a music and materials associate.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's great. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Love that. That's wonderful. Well, tell us a little bit about your show. Tell us about Scars of Your Body.
So, The Scars of Your Body is I guess you could say, post apocalyptic musical um, about what happens after the earth has been wiped out by climate change and humans attempt to colonize an already inhabited planet called Alpha Centauri and discover that it's a lot harder to do that than they thought it would be. And so Alpha Centauri is inhabited by the race of Alanarchs, and they rule society with an iron fist. And specifically, the show is about this boy who is the only human to have ever grown up entirely on Alpha Centauri and has no memories of Earth because he was brought. The colonization happened when he was a baby, and so um, he grows up entirely on Alpha Centauri and discovers this sideshow that is run by the Barker, who is an Alanarch, who is very much in the Alanarch caste system, I guess you could call it. And the show is about what happens when the boy meets the abundantly scarred woman, who's one of the members of the sideshow, and she ends up sort of revealing to him what really happened to the humans after the colonization. And the boy learns that there's a more complicated past and history than he ever was taught that there was. And so it's about what happens when that realization comes to his mind and he tries to figure out the world that he's in and whether or not it's the world he wants.
Awesome. Yes. Sorry, I've got a grumpy toddler right now. But yeah, no, that's incredible. Your show actually was one of my favorites that we read through. Yes, my love. Hold on, sweetie. Um, is one of my favorites. But like what about your show would you say is like the untold story or like most important or like why people should come see it?
I would say that the main things that Valerie and I are going after are the main theme, I would say, of the show is this idea of seeing contemporary society's problems through the lens of the future. So we see in The Scars of Your Body a world that we don't know, which is what I think all great musicals do. They take us to a world we didn't really know we wanted to see and they transport us there. And what Scars does is it kind of turns that concept on its head, and it shows us a world that could theoretically be in the future, and tells us, and we see the same problems um, manifesting on that world that we have in contemporary society today. Issues with the environment, issues with gender oppression, issues of identity, and um, even though one of the central themes of the show is this idea that the Alanarchs think that they're a superior race to humans, and create this pageant about humans destroying the earth that they take, that they use as one of their first sideshow acts, almost like a vaudeville routine. And it's done all in this way of like showing, as almost like propaganda, to show the Alanarchs, hey, we're better than these humans. Um, but then over the course of the show, we see that that's really not the case. And so I would say, to answer your question, what Valerie and I really want the audience to walk away with is this idea of recognizing issues that are really fundamental to now, but through the lens of a sort of weird and and also funny and silly kind of world that we've created in the future, in this area that we don't know. And so from my perspective as a composer, that was an interesting challenge, because there's no trying to create, most musicals are crafted in such a way where the musical language is determined by the subject matter, which makes sense. So, if you're writing a show that takes place in the 1850s in Britain, your music's probably going to sound post-romantic. Um,
Right.
but for this world, because it takes place in the future on an alien planet, there is no real musical reference point. And so we had to create our own, we had to imagine our own uh, musical world, in addition to um, in addition to a world of the characters. Um, and so I would say that we want the audience to absorb the world and see how the world reflects the world that we live in now.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. And yeah, that whole like finding a reference point. But I think you guys do a really good job of making it like unfamiliar while still being familiar, especially with the music. I also love the note in there, something about this is the orchestration, but like it's meant to look like it's falling apart. So, do what you can do or something like that. I love that, especially as somebody who's worked in education and like done things with no budget. Like, I think it's fabulous and so much fun to add. Like, think about
Mhm.
having less as adding to the aesthetic. Um,
Right, right, yeah. And that's one of the ways that we're hoping that because one of the challenge, I would say the biggest challenge that Valerie and I have faced with this show from a production standpoint, is that this show falls in a very bizarre place of being both an experimental show that pushes a lot of boundaries. It isn't based on any previous properties. It's a
right.
completely original concept. There's no, and there's not really like sort of one central joke or theme or anchor point that a lot of shows that are like that usually have, like Urinetown. Um, so it's both an experimental property, and it's also a show that is fairly large. It requires a cast of 10 to 16, which for a musical is not the biggest, but it's also not small. And it requires a decent sized orchestra of at least 7. And so getting theaters to take a chance on it, like getting producers to look at it and take a chance on it, has been really difficult, because it is both a risk and it's also an expensive risk. And so that's one of the things that we're thinking about how we navigate. And that's part of what we've decided with the production notes about how, like, yes, this show in some ways is written to be kind of a big Broadway musical, and that's what it ideally will be at the end. But also, in some ways, it serves the world in a different way for it to be a very low budget piece. Um, if there's just a cheap electric piano there and that's it, in some ways that might actually serve the aesthetic of the show better. And so that's I would say that's where we this show is in an advanced enough draft right now that we're kind of thinking about those things more than like going back and revising the content.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I can definitely see that. And I think you're right. I think that encourages people, and I also think it appeals to like fringe type festivals, and I think it appeals to like there used to be a theater here in Denver that did weird stuff like this, that did
Mhm.
um and was willing to take more chances on kind of bizarre shows. Um and they might be making a resurgence, and this is one that, like, if they do decide to come back, I'm going to be like, poke 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 poke.
Mhm.
um so with
That would
that
be
being
amazing.
with that being said, like, why should someone in Denver produce your show? Like, why do you think it should be done here beyond
I
festival?
mean, I don't think either Valerie or I have any real connections to Colorado specifically, but I think that there is one of the biggest, I would say the biggest thing I've learned since starting my new job actually is that um, theater really is, it, as long as you know where to look, theater really does exist anywhere and everywhere. And so, and I think that it should. I don't think theater should be confined to um, just this one idea of like Broadway or off Broadway or regional. I don't think it should be something that, you know, is centered around, you know, New York necessarily. It should exist everywhere. And so I think that a piece like this, particularly in a state like Colorado or one of the Western states that is more arguably in the immediate danger of being ravaged by something like climate change um, than you know, a state like New York, maybe, uh, this show is almost even more relevant. Um, and so I think that, and I also think it's particularly relevant. Valerie and I are both fairly politically minded writers. And I think that in areas of the US that are more ideologically mixed, I would say that um, that's really the ideal that's where that's going to be those are going to be the areas where this show creates the most, I guess you could say, controversy or creates the most stir. And that's kind of what we want. We don't want this show to be playing to an audience that already agrees with everything it says, um because that's not what healthy dialogue is. And I think ultimately as writers it's our duty to engage in a dialogue with society. And so I think that, I mean, I grew up in Wisconsin, and I think that, you know, my dream one day would be for this show to play in Milwaukee. Um, I mean, obviously, I would love to see it go to Broadway or off Broadway, but I think just as much, if not more than that, I would love to see it play in the Midwest, um, because I think it would just be so interesting to see how audiences respond to it. And I don't have many roots in Colorado specifically, but from what I know about it enough, it seems like it would be a similar thing in terms of you would get an audience that brings in um, a lot more perspective than necessarily an audience in New York or LA, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado is a fairly purple state. We're more, I mean, it's very liberal in the city, and then we've got the
Yeah, we're
rural
right.
chunks. But yeah, it's very much like, I think you could have very good conversations around the show. I feel like your show would also lend itself well to like talkbacks and like interesting things. There's some people up in CU Boulder, Beth Osnes. She was my advisor in grad school. But she does a
Mm-hmm.
lot of climate theater. Like, that's her whole
Mm-hmm.
like thing, is climate theater. And there's another show called Tree Sun, or like TREESON, so it's treason, but Tree Sun.
That's
That's a
so funny because I actually briefly script doctored that show.
Oh, funny. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they were part of that. We have I don't know, I'd call them a sister festival called the New Musical Project, and that was part of that one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's anyway, but that's just another one that's doing that, and I think it's pretty cool to see more of that, like, climate informed stuff, but also like I love sci-fi as a genre, and I feel like we don't have enough
Mhm.
sci-fi musicals in the world. Like, I think
That's the other
that's
thing I was about to say. That's honestly more like if you were to do this interview with Valerie, I think she'd focus more on that because she
yeah.
identifies as a frustrated genre writer more than anything else, as a very like hyper feminist comedy writer that's also secretly a genre writer. Although I think now she would probably take the word secretly out of it. Um, but she has the same like that. We both and for me, I love sci-fi too. And part of the reason I was attracted to the script when it was sent to me was that I'd never ever seen or heard of a show remotely like it before.
Right.
And like I studied a lot of musical theater in high school and college, and this is the first time I'd ever read a script where I was like, I can literally think of no comparison to this, at least as a musical. I can think
Yeah.
of some plays, but I cannot think of a musical that is trying to do what this is doing.
Yeah,
And
not a
so,
stage musical, no.
no,
It does remind me of like um remind me a little bit of Repo, the
oh,
Genetic
I've never heard of
Opera.
that.
Oh, go check it out. It's super weird. It's more in the like horror sci-fi realm. But it's a movie musical.
Ah, okay.
And it's Sweet Pea. It's very similar. It's very similar to this in the sense that like it has no prior content.
Mm,
Maybe a graphic novel. I can't remember though. I think it's original, and it's I think it was original at the time, and it probably has branches off now because it's kind of got like a weird culture. Like it became kind of
mm,
like a cultural thing, um but yeah, Repo, that's kind of what it made me think of a little bit, was that, oh no,
mm.
was that sort of vibe,
Yeah.
and kind of similar idea, um, as far as like something kind of new and original and weird and jarring and like interesting.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely check out Repo. It's sort of in the same vein but more horror. I put
Yeah, the
horror
only
into
other
quotes.
comparison that we've gotten, and I'm so glad you said that because we've been trying to find other shows that could inspire and be models for us for this. And the only comparison that we've gotten that we remotely that's like remotely close is Vonnegut.
Oh,
And
for sure. Yeah, I can see that.
and
Yeah,
like that's a great comparison. But the problem is Vonnegut didn't write any musicals.
right.
So,
If
um,
Vonnegut was a
yeah,
musical, uh,
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Nope, I think that's a great comparison. I love it. The next question I have for you, normally I have them on my phone written down, but with the child, it's been a little challenging today. Um, the next question I have for you: what is the next steps for your show? What
Well, that's a good
what's
question.
next? What do you want to be next? What do you want to manifest into the world?
Yeah, that is a conversation we are actively having right now. I think that so there's both an immediate answer to that question and a sort of more long-term answer to that question. I would say the immediate answer is that like festivals like this one are, I think, perfect for where we are right now because right now we've gotten to a stage with the script and score where it's really beyond like a writer's workshop
Hmm.
because like we could if we wanted to take this into something like BMI or to something like Across a Crowded Room, but it's and we were going to do that and then we just got so far into it that Valerie, who's a lot more experienced with play development than I am because she's a whole generation older, was like, yeah, we're too far along for that. At the same time, we're not yet at the place where we feel like we could really successfully submit this for something like the O'Neill. So we're kind of in this weird in between place where we have our first like advanced draft. Obviously, the show is going to change before it gets fully produced, but in order for those changes to happen, we need to see it first. And so, I think the immediate goal is more festivals like this one, or if in lieu of that, some kind of workshop production or concert reading. Um, and those opportunities are few and far between, unfortunately, and that's one of the things that we're finding in terms of submitting this thing just everywhere and getting rejection after rejection after rejection until finally something like this happens. Um, and part of being a writer is just feels a bit like throwing a rock at a mountain that has a cloud around it, and Um, if you hit, and you don't even know when you hit the mountain, and if you do, you're lucky. Um, but So I would say like the immediate goal is something like a concert reading or a workshop production. Um, and then, but really, shortly after that, we really would like to get some kind of full developmental production of this thing done. Um, like, so not just the first act, because most concert readings they present like an abridged version of the show or just the first act for budgetary reasons. But so like that's the other reason why part of what we're doing right now is actually sending it to individual producers and saying, hey, what would we need to do to this for this to be something you'd consider? Um, like at a company in New York, like the Civilians, or even Theater Row or the Tank, areas like places like that that are more, or even maybe Soho Rep that are more down for like experimental work that would fit more what our show is aesthetically. Um, or if we can find an opportunity like that at a regional, um, somewhere outside of New York, that would be great. Um, Again, though, that like all of that is contingent on finding the right producer for our show or producers. So I would say that's our like long term next step is actually finding a production. Um, but again, that's a conversation that Valerie and I are actively having now because I've had one musical before this that like finished and got produced, but that was in college, and that's different. Um, and Valerie has a lot of experience as a playwright, but this is her first musical, and so neither of us have been through the process of actually seeing a full piece through to fruition, and so that's part of the knowledge that we're hoping to glean from things like this festival is like you know what are those steps for us in order to get this thing to finally where we want it, which is a production,
Right.
and and ideally what the final end goal is some kind of New York production off Broadway or Broadway, so that it has the name recognition that we could license it out and publish it. Because we think the show would ultimately live as like a piece that sort of college theaters, maybe ambitious high schools,
Oh, heck yeah.
or even maybe some really ambitious community theaters could do. But I think that from the beginning, we've always envisioned it as a piece that would live in the college theater scene, really.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I mean, I definitely see it as a college. Yeah, I could see it in colleges. I could see it in some artsy high schools. I can definitely see it in some quirky regional places. I mean, one of the composers we've had in the festival, they did so Extended Stay was a piece. Are you okay, sweetie? You can get it yourself, honey. Again, apologies. Nathan's making appearances today. But her name is Jenny Stafford, and she's got a lovely website. I would go check it out. But she does all of her stuff. I don't think any of her work is in like a publishing house necessarily.
mhm,
She has an agent that she works through and licenses her stuff out. Um,
mhm,
and like she's done like her show Prodigy. She did it. It's had some college readings and things like that, and had college productions. I actually produced that show as a film during COVID with my students,
oh,
um,
nice.
which was really cool. And then she submitted Extended Stay um, to the festival last year. We did a portion of it, and then we actually did that as a staged reading back in January, February, which is like the goal
Mhm,
is that at least one of the pieces from this year also goes into like a staged concert reading of the full show.
mhm,
Because their piece was in a very similar place to yours. Like it just needed to be in people's hands. It needed actors.
mhm.
It needed to be on its feet a little bit. And so, but she might be somebody to look at, or she's actually really lovely to chat with.
What is he? Can you spell her name for me again?
Yeah, Jenny Stafford, Jenni, and then Staff. Believe it's ORD,
Yeah.
Stafford. If you go on
Said she's a
the
composer,
website,
right?
what was that?
You said she's a composer, right?
She's actually a writer. She's
A
worked with
writer.
a couple
Okay.
of different composers. Prodigy was Willem Uvestason, And then extended stay was Scotty Arnold, or her
Got
team,
it.
or those composers. But she's got a lovely website. On the wellspring.org, wellspringtheater.org website, there is like a past, I forget where I'm the one who did it, so can't remember where it is. But there's a spot under About or under the festival or something that's like past shows or like shopping for a show. And if you
Hmm.
find extended stay on there, her
Ah,
information and
okay.
email is
Got
there
it.
too. To reach out and talk. And actually we also have, I need to send it out to all of you, but we also do have a Facebook group that's the festival alumni
Mhm.
for cast and
Oh, okay.
composers and stuff. That you can jump into and I mean, we need more engagement, so ask questions, do things. It's very cool. But yeah, no, that's one of the reasons we started this festival was because we felt like they're just. I mean, I wrote a show called Not Just Anything, and I was in
Hmm.
the place where like I just needed to have people read it. I just needed to see
Hmm.
it, and yeah, I had some friends like sit down and do a read like at a house in Breckenridge, but like that's not the same as like giving it to another music director and saying, hey, what did you
Hmm.
notice? What do you see? Where does
Right.
how does this land? And so that's why we started this, is because they're just,
Hmm.
especially here in Colorado, there's tons of places to go have your play read. There's tons of
Hmm.
places where you can submit or take your stuff for stage readings of plays, but musicals nobody wants to touch with 10-foot pole. And I'm
Right.
just like, y'all, like musicals are a huge chunk of the theater like market. Like why aren't we, and like we do tons of musicals here in Colorado. Like we have a thriving musical theater scene. Why in the world are we not doing more new work?
Mhm.
So anyway, that's my soapbox.
No, no, I fully agree. Like, I that's there's actually, I think, surprising musical theater communities in almost every corner of the U.S. at least, from what
Yeah,
I've observed. Because I mean, like in Milwaukee, a lot of people would not think so, but Milwaukee has a thriving theater community, and especially a thriving musical theater community. And um, if there was a company like mine in Milwaukee, I would probably go live there. Um, and uh, because but it's this exact same thing that you're saying. Like, there's all these places that produce musicals, but they don't produce new work.
right.
Um, and that seems to be I saw that in Los Angeles. I see that even some you get that in New York as well. The only difference with New York is just that there's just more companies,
Right.
um, which is why you're more likely to get more new work produced. But it's not like people are any less wary of new work here. Um, and so that doesn't surprise me, honestly. Like, and that's one of the reasons why I actually have a lot of hope for the show, is that I think that the show is one that will ultimately have its most fruitful life, like in the college and community theater scene. Um, and I think that's honestly probably where the audience is going to be for it too,
Hmm.
especially the college theater scene. I think that's really the audience I think that we're going for the most.
Yeah, I feel that. I definitely feel that. That's wonderful. And then my last question for you is: are there any, based on what you saw from the read or anything, are there any shows that we're featuring that you're excited to learn more about or see more from?
I have to be honest. I just have not had any time to go to and attend the rehearsals and anything yet. I really wanted to do the one this past Monday, but unfortunately, I had to get my BMI application together. Um, and it's difficult for me specifically just because of the time zone change.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Um, but so I haven't gotten a chance to look at any of the other work, and that's actually one of the reasons why I really wish I could come to the festival.
I know.
But I just, unfortunately, flights are just too expensive right now. Um,
But we will. We are
but
recording.
I'm going to
Oh,
be
what?
there over Zoom for sure. I'll be there over Zoom.
Yeah. The
Um,
performances we've tried live streaming and it doesn't work as well. We might be able to this year though, because we're at a different
mm,
place. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but we do plan on recording and putting it up on our YouTube
Well,
channel.
I will definitely watch the
So
recording
you'll be
then.
able to see it.
I want to see the other pieces and because I feel like I don't know anything about any of the other pieces at all, other
Totally
than like
fine.
names.
It's totally fine, and like, we all are busy, and it's totally fine. But
I'm just curious,
excited to see any of them, I think, is also a
yeah,
better
yeah,
answer. Like,
yeah. I would love to see. I would love to see the whole festival if when the recording's available. Are most are the other writers all from different areas too, or is it like mostly people in Colorado? Or
oh,
I'm
it's pretty spread out. This year's class is pretty um diverse in multiple
all
ways.
over the place. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
we've
what I was
got
assuming.
well, we've got everything from, like, one of our composers is a middle schooler in Golden, Colorado, named
Wow.
Beckham. Uh, he better get on and do an interview because I want to talk to this kid.
Mhm.
But so we've got literally a middle schooler who wrote he wrote all the music for a Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe adaptation. That's lovely. Like,
Mhm.
he needs an editor, but it's lovely.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about it being written by a 12-year-old, you're like, holy cow, kid.
Mhm.
So that's incredible. And then we've got, yeah, there's quite a few people out on the East Coast. We've got quite a few from New York. We've got, lots from Colorado. Trying to think where else people are from.
Do you have any LA? Just out of curiosity.
This year, I don't know. I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
sure
I,
about
I
this
went to
year.
college in LA, so I know the LA musical theater writing
Yeah.
community.
We had 2 years ago Ryan Luovano.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
he's
I
he we
know him. I
did
know him. Actually.
Oh, nice. We did his piece 57 bus as a full stage
Oh
reading.
yeah,
Mhm.
I was at a developmental reading of the one about the Oh my God, the that thing that happened in San Francisco, or was it
Yeah,
the
the non-binary person who was their skirt was burned. And
Yes,
it's based on
yes,
true
yeah, yeah,
story.
yeah.
Yeah, that's super
Yes,
cool. Yeah, we did a full staged reading of that. Because we've done the festival a few different ways. The initial vision, the first year, which was 2020, so that all went out the
Mm-hmm.
window. But the initial vision was to do 3 nights, 2 shows in full staged reading, and one that was like a showcase.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we've done that. We did that with that year. So the 57 bus and another show called Rocky Mountain High were both full staged readings, and then there was a showcase night. Um, and then this year or last year, we tried 3 different nights, all of them different showcases. And this
Mm-hmm.
year, we're doing one showcase performance across like
Mm-hmm.
3 nights of the same showcase performance. So
Got it.
we've kind of tried it a few different ways depending on what we've gotten and depending on who we have. Especially moving to this model of we will take one of them and do a full staged reading in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
Work with composers to do that and authors. So I think we're moving more towards this like showcase multiple nights model, but we'll see what happens next year.
Out of curiosity, would that be a separate application we would do?
No. The way
Okay.
we've done it, honestly, the honest process is, we sit down after the festival is over, and like we get feedback from the audience, and actors about, what show
Mm-hmm.
do you want to see more from? Which one are you most interested in? You're
Mm.
safe, baby. You're okay. Um, you yeah, we get feedback from audience, we get feedback from other folks, and basically, I'm the one who music directs that and does that. I'm sort of the primary Wellspring human.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of it is, what show audience loved, or the actors were interested in, and also what resonated with me and what I feel like is in a place to do that, because not every show is ready for that. And like, we're
Right.
our festival's
Yeah.
about in progress. Like, we take work wherever it's at, and we just want to leave it better than we found it.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot, especially this year, a lot of them are in that place of they just need a stage reading.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's quite a few I'm very excited to like look at for a spring read. And basically the way that process works is, we kind of pick our top favorite, and then we pick like a second, and we reach out
Mhm.
and just say, hey, this is what this looks like, and if you're interested, yes or no, and go from there. So that's kind of the process, um, and what it looks like. Okay, I see that you would like to put that shoe on, and I'm going to wrap this up, and then we will put that shoe on. Okay. Uh, thank you so much for chatting with me today, and thank you to you and also our audience for tolerating a very grumpy toddler. But yeah, come see the festival August 18th to the 20th. It'll also be online.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Please
much for
be
chatting with
there.
us.
Even though I
You are
can't be.
wonderful. And tell your compatriot she can also sign up for an interview. I'd love to talk with her too. So
Yeah, I will let her know.
please tell her sign up, and we'll get her on here too and get her side of it. So awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Kelly.